Hello there and welcome to the International Seeds Conference 2021, which is looking at adapting and changing behaviour and practice. My name is Dr. Georgiana Allison and I will be giving you a quick run through of my paper today, which explores the perceptions of sustainability within English further education. So for those of you who don't know, further education is a generic term for education and training that takes place most often, but not exclusively, in FE colleges and is characterised by the teaching of basic skills such as numeracy and literacy, A-levels, NVQs, foundation degrees and diplomas, and vocational education delivered through apprenticeships and work-based training. There are 234 colleges in England. My study focuses on the proportion of colleges that make up the majority of the sector, which are general further education colleges. At the time of the data being collected, there were quite a few more general further education colleges than there are now. There have been several mergers that have taken place within the sector. And indeed, since the time of writing, the statistics have been updated. So the number is slightly different, shown here to that in my paper. Why do this study? What prompted this study? Well, it was my observation as a practitioner within the sector, as a sustainability practitioner within the sector, that the sector really was struggling to understand its contribution to sustainability as the wider holistic term, and actually more often than not it was its sense was that if it had got a green new campus, that it was an energy efficient campus, brand new campus, that was its job done, that it had done its thing to contribute towards sustainability. But as we all know, the contribution of education to sustainability, sustainable development, is far wider than that, as demonstrated by the Sustainable Development Goals. And for me, it felt as though that there was a confusion regarding what sustainability actually means. And indeed, this is reflected in literature, where since the 1987 definition was introduced, 80 and more alternative and often contradictory definitions have emerged and continue to do so. And semantic arguments about that definition can and does prevent action. So my observations whilst working in the sector were that people didn't really know what it meant, and therefore they gave it to estates more often than not to green the campus. That's not to say that education, the content of education delivered in FE colleges wasn't addressing sustainability, but when asked the sector, the message most commonly received is that its role was to do with campus greening. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more to understand really what leaders felt, what they perceived sustainability to mean, and if that differed depending on the hierarchy within the colleges. At the time of writing, there hadn't been many studies at all that explored FE, and as I explain in my paper, that's probably due to where it sits in the hierarchy of education. So it sort of falls in between schools and universities. So people leave school and either go on to an FE college or they go to university. And because research tends to happen within higher education, there hasn't been much FE self-generated research, certainly not within sustainability. So I use a grounded theory methodology in the absence of previous studies. My sample at the time was that of the 157 group, which is now known as the Collab group. And at the time it represented the largest FE colleges in England based on enrolment and turnover. My target interviewees were principals and chief executives. My actual interviewees were 12 principals and chief executives, 5 vice principals or directors for corporate services, resources or property. 81% of participants belonged to the target sample, representing 44% of the 157 group membership. The data was collected in 2013 using 17 semi-structured interviews, 6 focus groups, and the content analysis of 45 websites and documents. And I use substantive coding to analyse all of that data. My results, I don't have long to go into the detail described on the table on the right there, but participants universally were asked about how they define sustainability, where they perceive power for sustainability leadership as most effective, and to provide examples of sustainability in practice. The first result was that sustainability means strategy to leaders, but must not change strategy. So colleges must remain sustainable. They must continue to exist, but sustainability in a holistic sense must not let the colleges deviate from their projected development path. So it has to be compatible with what college leaders perceive as being important to colleges, rather than to change those values or to change those development paths. The second common result was that it was perceived very much to be a states' job. So as long as sustainability pays for itself, then nobody other than estates was seen to have responsibility for sustainability as they defined it. However, leaders did take full responsibility for financial sustainability. So for me, PowerPointing really did abound. And finally, old habits die hard. It's easier and more linear to tackle quantitative changes, to tackle those things that you can measure, rather than to explore the things that actually lead to those decisions being made, i.e. the qualitative changes, the values-based decision making. So it was, in all, it really felt as though sustainability still had a confusing, was perceived to be quite a confusing and often contradictory meaning, reflecting the observations made within the literature. So for me, and indeed, as seen within literature, this reflected the rhetoric reality gap. It's difficult to say. Sustainable development was conceived as a reaction to an increasing awareness of environmental degradation, but this study reinforced that the term has been adopted to directly or indirectly perpetuate environmental degradation. Sustainability was used as a synonym, another difficult word, for the continuation of existing development paths, i.e. leaders felt as though sustainability was essentially to keep the college going, and that sustained or successful growth as an indicator of economic development. And this has a lot to do with how colleges are funded, which again I haven't had the time to go into today. And all of this really reflected an accommodative but not a transformative approach to sustainability. So the sector was happy to accommodate sustainability as long as it paid for itself, but the pedagogical or operational sustainability, as identified by Stephen Sterling in 2004, continues to revolve around the common assumption that sustainability can be achieved by simply adding it to existing structures and processes. So the conclusion is that sustainability was largely understood by FE leadership to be synonymous with environmental responsibility. However, it is to this that the least accountability was demonstrated. FE, as part of the education sector, was celebrated as being a key contributor to the country's economic and social sustainability, and that's a narrative that continues today. Technological innovation and our faith in it as a problem solver is actually a focus that is counterintuitive for sustainability, because it does not require the deep learning or a change in values or behaviour, and that came from that result whereby sustainability has to pay for itself, and it was very much a linear quantitative path that the colleges were taking, rather than challenging those values and behaviours that led to decisions being made. And really, further studies should continue to investigate and compare leadership and other stakeholder perceptions of sustainability and its practice within education or the public sector more widely. So have perceptions changed in the last 10 years? And if so, how and why? Thank you very much. This is my list of references, and I would really welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.